Even on the very first page of the article, The 7 Biggest Threats to Mankind, there are glaring signs that the author is allowing what he wants to be true to compromise his ability to treat the subject matter in a way even approaching a fair-minded and intellectually honest manner. He writes, "Life on Earth will one day be completely unsustainable. Luckily, that won't be for 1 billion years or so." This kind of lazy, sloppy, and undisciplined thinking lies conspicuously at odds with the eye for detail that the magazine displayed when it commented on the speed of growth of fingernails relative to one another, and it is an utterly misleading statement concerning what we know and do not know about the future fate of life on this planet, so it warrants a critique on more than one level. Firstly, it assumes that the only way life on Earth could completely cease is when the surface of this planet becomes too hot for life to survive due to the sun's natural life cycle. This is certainly not something that can be safely assumed, for it could well be the case that mankind's actions result in the complete cessation of life on Earth well before the sun renders the entire planet uninhabitable. Secondly, there is currently a great deal of disagreement within the scientific community concerning the length of the future window of opportunity for life on this planet. The general consensus seems to be that 1 billion years is the very uppermost estimate, with several recent studies confidently asserting the conclusion that previous estimates had been wildly inaccurate, and that a mere 500 million more years of life on Earth remain due to the extreme heat that will be radiated off by the sun within something like that time frame. Sentient life has already been staving off deprivation and suffering and dying on Earth for approximately 500 million years, and the question of whether the sun will guarantee the ending of this real-life horror show in 500 million or 1,000 million more years is a question that is both still very much wide open and very far indeed from being a moot point. It is clear then that the author was seduced by the thought of a vague and comfortingly distant round number of future years for life to continue to thrive on Earth, rather than motivated by a compulsive desire to come to grips with the latest findings and disagreements within the relevant scientific communities whose work impinges upon such issues as the future fate of life on Earth. The author next pauses to concede that the end of the world may in fact occur prior to the sun causing it to do so, but only by citing the 2012 doomsday prediction made by the Mayans. One can only wonder why the author of a magazine that professes so much enthusiasm about its self-given missions to present facts and to narrate mankind's greatest scientific feats to its readership decided to suddenly encroach upon the subject matter of prophecy. But it seems to me that the obsolete thoughts of primitive and superstitious people who died many hundreds of years ago is not perhaps the most fertile of grounds to look for clues that may shed light on how likely we are to self-implode in the not-too-distant future. After that, the author states the following: there are in fact 7 scenarios that could destroy huge portions of civilization or even wipe out humanity altogether. Wonderpedia asked geologists, meteorologists, and astrophysicists to assess the likelihood of each scenario and explain what the possible impact would be in the seconds, hours, weeks and months following the catastrophe. So what are the 7 scenarios of which the author speaks? Well, they are namely an asteroid impact, an eruption or series of eruptions from a supervolcano, a nuclear world war, a solar storm, an earthquake chain reaction, a viral pandemic, and a gamma ray burst. It seems curious to me that the magazine felt that interviewing specialists from merely 3 disciplines would avail themselves of all the information they needed to know in order to write an authoritative article on this topic. But this is indicative of the careless manner in which most people omit the most threatening existential risks that face our species from their reckoning. After all, Who wants to overly fret about people being unable to celebrate their bodies and minds in the not too distant future due to the world lying in ashes? Certainly not, I put it to you, the publishing team at Wonderpedia. It is interesting to note at this very early stage of my analysis how the majority of the threats that are discussed in the article are located either miles upon miles below the surface of our planet, in the form of earthquakes and supervolcanoes, or at distances from Earth that can be measured in relation to the speed of light, a solar storm, an asteroid impact, and a gamma ray burst. Although it is well worth noting and discussing these threats when assessing existential risks to the human race, it seems to me that they hardly warrant the primary focus they are afforded in the article. After all, I would argue that the biggest threats to mankind's survival lurk not deep within the planet or far, far away somewhere out there in the night sky, but rather they lie within mankind itself, a thought that barely seems to have occurred to the good old staff at Wonderpedia. One is reminded of a quote from Sir Martin Rees' book, Our Final Hour, in which he attempts to warn humanity about the dangers it faces later on in this century, while simultaneously overlooking the fact that not every single person on Earth is deeply and hopelessly enamoured of our species. The post-human potential is so immense that not even the most misanthropic amongst us would countenance its being foreclosed by human actions. One can quite easily imagine the editorial team at Wonderpedia making a very similar kind of unbelievably naive claim as Rees does here. No one could possibly bear the thought of humans not existing anymore, so therefore there's no need to reflect on human history, human psychology, or the new destructive technologies that are currently being researched and designed at exponentially rapid rates. Instead, we'll scan the heavens for threats that lie countless of millions of miles away, or concern ourselves with what natural disasters may occur mile after mile beneath our feet. That way we can distract ourselves from the fact that the biggest threats to mankind are the threats that mankind poses to itself. Such a farcically mistaken reading of the dilemma humanity is in can be likened to accusing Winnie the Pooh of intending to murder and carve up an innocent woman while Jack the Ripper sits unmolested nearby. However, I am being uncharitable here. It just simply be the case that the people responsible for researching, editing and publishing material for Wonderpedia have never actually heard of nanotechnology, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence or man-made viruses. If so, I am more than happy to retract my original accusation of them being naive and replace it with a levelling of the charge that they are just plain dumb. Nanotechnology alone poses numerous and ominous threats to mankind's survival in the coming centuries, and thus its omission from their article is unforgivable. For those of you who are not acquainted with what it is, nanotechnology is defined in the Oxford English Dictionary as the branch of technology that deals with dimensions and tolerances of less than 100 nanometers, especially the manipulation of individual atoms and molecules. Make no mistake, nanotech weapons could prove to be vastly more powerful and destructive than anything mankind has hitherto seen. Eric Drexler, author of the science book Engines of Creation, writes that replicators can be more potent than nuclear weapons. To devastate Earth with bombs would require masses of exotic hardware and rare isotopes, but to destroy life with replicators would require only a single speck made of ordinary elements. Replicators give nuclear war some company as a potential cause of extinction, giving a broader context to extinction as a moral concern. Now let's consider just some of the ways nanotechnology could prove to be mankind's undoing in the not too distant future. First of all, there is a possible grey goo catastrophe in which tiny, omnivorous, self-replicating machines could spread exponentially, chewing their way through the entire biosphere in a matter of days, leaving the Earth's surface stripped of all life. Then there is the risk of horrifically effective weapons being in the form of nanotech-built anti-personnel weapons, which could become capable of seeking and injecting toxin into unprotected humans. Just to illustrate the potential scope of this, the human lethal dose of botulism toxin is about 100 nanograms, or about 1/100th the volume of the weapon. As many as billion toxin-carrying devices, theoretically enough to kill every human on Earth, could be packed into a single case. Yet another nanotech weapon that could be used to wipe out humanity is the Grey Cloud, a self-replicating airborne nanodevice theorized by the engineer Ralph Merkel, which catalyzes carbon dioxide graphite. If unleashed, result in a solid wall that would cover the Earth, block the sun, and destroy life on Earth in as little as a few days. If these kinds of threats seem far-fetched, then at least something that mankind will not have to contend with until far into the future, then reflect on the fact that many futurists predict that by 2025 AD, nanotech assemblers, similar to Star Trek replicators, will start to become commonplace in kitchens everywhere. Technology is racing ahead at breakneck speeds, and there is no reason to doubt that this pattern will not continue unabated for at least the foreseeable future. Certainly, the multiple threats that nanotech weapons alone will pose to mankind in the coming centuries are likely to have to be faced long before an asteroid impact or solar flare threatens to destroy our species first, despite what the DNA-worshipping brethren at Wonderpedia might have you believe. This being the case, let's look at why I believe that nanotechnology has such a high potential to throw the spanner in the works in mankind's inglorious and utterly misguided and hideous quest to outlive the dinosaurs. Firstly, nanotechnology can be used to infiltrate, seize, change and govern a territory or an entire world. We are not talking about local effects restricted to the confines of a single country or continent, but rather to changes that are well and truly global. Nanotechnology, therefore, well and truly qualifies as a form of technology that could end human history for good. Secondly, nanotechnology can be used to cause discriminate destruction. Towns, cities, countries, or even entire species could be targeted through the use of destructive nanotech weaponry. Thirdly, research and development of nanotech weapons cannot be tracked as easily as, say, nuclear weapons. Criminals, terrorists, or rogue states could be free to tinker with the technology in non-socially sanctioned ways without anyone suspecting or even being aware of the fact that they are doing so. Think of Dr. Evil in a secret bunker, tinkering with cutting-edge nanotech weaponry at his leisure whilst planning to hold entire countries to ransom, and one can get a sense of what may in time be possible. Fourthly, nanotech weapon factories could be delivered easily to a particular location in advance of being used. In a similar vein, nanotech weapons could be ridiculously easy to smuggle in relation to more familiar forms of weaponry, due to its unimaginably minute size. Fifthly, widespread use of nanotechnology could cause devastating environmental damage, compounding the substantial harm we have already caused and are causing to the planet. Finally, uncontrollable availability of nanotechnology could result from both insufficient regulation, resulting in little impediment to its proliferation, or alternatively, overzealous regulations, giving rise to a flourishing and unstoppable black market industry. There seems to be little to no happy medium. This technology is something that will almost certainly become available to the masses in some form or another in the coming decades, regardless of the efforts of any Luddite campaigners out there. Moreover, nanotech weapons can be developed much more rapidly than, for example, nuclear weapons, due to faster, cheaper prototyping. There will be an arms race for sure, and power relations between countries will shift and change as they have done so throughout human history. We live in interesting times indeed.